Introduction to Marvel Immortal Cultivation in Asgard. Asgard has such good conditions, it's really a pity not to cultivate immortality. Knocking Yao Song. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At the end of the Han Dynasty and in the Tang Dynasty, there were wandering guests, so it was impossible to predict the Yao line. Vertical, horizontal, and reverse flow without barriers, stillness without action is color. I also drink alcohol and eat meat, guarding my rouge and cutting off lust. Sing and sing poems about rouge powder, and hold on to the precepts of wine and meat, which often fill the stomach. Color is medicine, wine is wealth, and there is no restraint in wine and color. Only because flower wine mistakenly grows, drinking with flowers brings tears to the gods and ghosts. Not breaking the precepts, not committing lewdness, breaking the precepts is like the true essence of Shen. Those who commit debauchery and lose the treasure of immortality must be obtained by a Taoist. Taoist people, truly scattered Han, wine is good friends, flowers are companions. Looking for real people in the streets and alleys, real people only play in the streets. Picking flowers and drinking Chongqing wine, the way of doing nothing in the scenery prospers. A group of fans often laugh at monsters, and Xianhua Xianjiu is a fairyland. This village is very welcoming, and the beautiful girl and baby are happy. For seasons of flowers are often picked in a cave, and when the flowers bear fruit, they grow medicine. Chongqing medicine, picking flower hearts, and layers of beautiful stamens in spring. At that time, people do not understand the principles of flowers, and a secret from heaven is straight and precious. Thanks to heaven and earth, feeling the emptiness, the master of encountering immortals is the ancestor. Whispering in the ear, we elevate the first peak of Penglai. The first peak is an immortal object, but it produces golden flowers and creates a trance. Word of mouth goes without memorizing words, one must have a strong spiritual root and bone marrow. Bone marrow, spiritual roots, spring in peach blossom holes. 7 or 7 white tigers are raised in pairs, and 8 or 8 green dragons weigh 1 pound. True parents, send me to the Yuan Palace. My mother, Jin Gong, has a warm nature. In the 12 palaces, the toad spirit appears, and the earthly spirit constantly descends to the heavenly soul. Lead is born, Mercury is born, and the jade furnace and golden cauldron are not cooked. One husband and one woman share the same heaven and earth, and one man and one woman share the same heaven and earth. Gung wants to be born, Jia wants to be born, and when Jia is born, Gung Dao begins to sprout. Extract the heavenly roots and the earthly marrow, and the white snow yellow buds will grow on their own. Lead also grows, Mercury also grows, and when Mercury grows, lead is cooked in one place. Cooking is not about essence and liquid, the essence of heaven and earth, the essence of the sun and the moon. Huang Po's match was a reunion, with no time difference in word-of-mouth transmission. The 3 elements of the 8 trigrams are all based on Mercury, and the 5 elements and 4 symbols are not separated from lead. Lead gives birth to Mercury, Mercury gives birth to lead, seizing the power of creation in the universe. Yao Yao was lost in a daze, forming clusters in a daze. Sex must be empty, mind must be specialized, do not send monkeys to climb again. Do not touch the dew when it first blooms, lock it in the cauldron and do not add it. In the jade furnace, the gentle fire shines brightly, and in the 12 hours, there is only one to guard. At this time, the ecliptic will be filled with yin and yang, and there will be no leakage of the 3 sexual elements in the palace. If qi is flowing, refine with true fire, do not let the Xianzhu leave the palace. Add fire to prevent danger, the 9th day hidden dragon cannot be refined. The news is burning, the sword is changing, and yellow buds are sprouting all over the earth. Within the 5 elements, 1 yang is born, and the 20.4 qi is released into the pearl banquet. When the fire is sufficient and the prescription is completed, there will be the sound of dragons and tigers howling. 3 lead only takes 1 lead, and the golden fruit fairy bud has not yet appeared. Install the furnace again, erect the cauldron again, cross the tiger and ride the dragon to leave the mortal realm. The sun's essence has just appeared, and the moon's radiance has condensed. 2 or 8 intersect at Renbing. Dragon Mercury not, tiger lead not, Pinglai is just one distance away. Kuan lead, Qian Mercury, Jin Dan Zhu, dragon lead, tiger Mercury is the most spiritual. To achieve this principle, the way is formed, and 30,000 divine dragons protect the crystal. Be punctual, set the sun, and engrave the symbols. Focus only on piety. Black lead, picking halal, a series of confrontations to ensure peace. 3 carts carry precious jewels and send them back to the treasure through spiritual communication. Blessed by the heavens and blessed by the earth, mixed with the essence of heaven, earth, sun, and moon. With a roar of the tiger, the dragon emerges from the cave, and the phoenix dances out of the golden city. Vermilion sand matches, Mercury stops, a red glow sets in the clear sky. The lead pool burst forth with golden light, and Mercury flames flowed into the imperial capital. Dragon and tiger mating, external holding surplus, walking saint flying spirit in the vase. In an hour, the golden pill appeared, and the purple cloud in the golden palace was born. The peach is ripe, the bait is taken, and the world is filled with joy. Fasting and waiting for a yang sheng, then entering Zhou Tianshan is the same. Similarly, the alchemy pill is infused with water and fire to steam through all levels. Nurturing the fetus in October is like a divine pill, how leisurely is it for a man to conceive. The inner alchemy is formed, the outer alchemy is formed, and the inner and outer alchemy is connected harmoniously. Forming a purple golden pill, it changes and soars through the sky and earth for a long time. Dan enters the abdomen, which is unusual. Yin and yang are stripped away and purified. Flying up, feathering, and transforming into 3 clear travelers, each achieving great success and reaching the heavens. 3 clear guests, driving Qiongyu, crossing the phoenix and soaring into the sky into Taishu. Like this, carefree and joyful, exploring the 3 realms is the most unique. A cultivator above the Tai Su realm, with a clear and rounded appearance, achieving nothing. There is nothing but the Tao, and the 5 directions reveal the true appearance of a person. Fairy children and fairies are greeted by colorful clouds, and a fax is sent in the Wuming Palace. Fax Gao, talking about romance, it's just a true lead refining Mercury essence. The sound and fate of the ice dissipate, and the external cultivators shrink their necks in shock. Point dry bones, stand in shape, the channel ladder is as flat as a palm. The 9 ancestors have achieved spiritual transcendence, who envies prosperity, nobility, and glory. Search for martyrs, search for talents, and transform into mortal beings with the Anlu Ding. If you are stingy with money and cherish treasures, millions of immortals will not come. A cultivator, do not speak recklessly of the heavenly harmony fold. 10,000 tribulations of dust and sand cannot be achieved, and all 7 orifices and eyes burst with blood. Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net. Poor person, swear to cut, wait to pick up all that has flowed. In the Tongyue Penglai Immortal Association, Fan Jing suffered endlessly. The world is short, more contemplative, the universe in the cave is long with the sun and moon. With unwavering determination and hard work for 3 or 2 years, we will endure countless tribulations and live a long life. De Sheng Dao, showing true immortality, tiger and tiger swords are not harmed. Water, fire, and dragons are harmless, clap your hands and Tiangong will laugh. These achievements are truly wonderful, and who is willing to share them with others? Fools die in love with sex and wealth, so immortals refuse to summon them. The true way is to choose no one, regardless of whether one is rich or poor. Rao, the emperor and his grandson, must go to the prosperity and file sharp points. Anger remains unchanged, foolishness remains unchanged, and one falls into the sea of reincarnation and life and death. Gold and jade pile up all over the mountains and rivers, and immortals sneer and refuse to accept them. The name is not noble, the way is extremely revered, and the sages and sages show their descendants. Riding on a proud horse with jade at my waist, I caught a glimpse like dust in a crevice. Dust in the gaps, fire in the stones, why pay attention for a long plan? Hard suffering cannot be recalled, and the struggle for profit and fame is like a boiling pot. Like a boiling pot, forever sinking and falling, lost in the true roots of the industry. Some people calm their hearts and tell you the secret of heaven. Destiny must be transmitted, nature must be understood, and it is up to you to achieve enlightenment and transcendence. On Sanqing Road, there are few people walking, and livestock are competing to enter. Report to the virtuous and virtuous, rest in awe and care, and protect the vital organs. If there is still a lack of beauty, persistent Bucha should lose his way. Only cultivating one's nature without cultivating one's destiny is the first disease of cultivation. Only cultivating one's ancestral nature without cultivating one's elixir will make it difficult for evil spirits to enter the holy realm. The Ming sect, lost in ancestral nature, is like a precious mirror without a precious mirror. Life is like a fool in heaven and earth, with no control over power, property, or wealth. The dual cultivation of life is both mysterious and profound, and the underwater waves drive the Dharma boat. Capturing the head of a dragon alive, only then do we know that the craftsman's hand is not deceitful. Chapter 1. Mysteries in the Fetus. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The starry sky of Asgard is very different from other planets. Sitting on the cliffs at the edge of the continent and looking far away, you will find a vast expanse of stars up and down, except for behind. Especially in the evening, it seems like the entire expanse of stars is right under your feet, incredibly magnificent and spectacular, which is a rare sight that can be reached in any place. Asgard is a magical place, a small continent located in the void of the universe. Although it is only such a small celestial body, the wonder of the universe is fully demonstrated here. There are normal days and nights here, and on such a small continent, it cannot be said how normal it is. In addition, there is normal gravity in air here, which seems so abnormal. After all, gravity is determined by mass, and it is not very normal for such a small continent to have normal gravity. There are also mountains and rivers here, as well as an ocean that flows continuously into the void of the universe from an unknown source. The seawater has never decreased and still occasionally beats against the reefs on the coast every day. In short, everything here is so magical, making people have an irresistible desire to explore and understand everything here. This continent not only provides living space for the Asgards, but also provides endless divine power to every Asgard, serving as the source of divine power for every Asgard and a place full of miracles. Although this is only a small continent, it is still quite huge for the Asgard people, who only have a population of about 100,000. After all, this continent still has nearly 1 million square kilometers, and it is a territory inhabited by the gods. If it is only as large as shown in the movie, how can it be possible for the gods to live there? To give a simple example, no one in the movie actually knows about the cave where Loki went to other planets. If Asgard is just a very small place, how could the gods who have lived in Asgard for countless years not find that cave? After all, it's on the mountain on the side of Rainbow Bridge. Just thinking about it makes you feel abnormal, right? After all, as a divine race, they have such a lack of understanding about their place of residence, and there are gatekeepers like Heimdall who can see everything but don't understand. Is this normal? Of course, this is just one reason, and another reason is that you can think about it. If you have supersonic running speed, is a place with only a few dozen kilometers in a radius too small for you? You only need a few tens of minutes to explore the entire continent. Doesn't it seem that this Protoss is too frustrated? Apart from being magical, Asgard is also a quiet place. Of course, apart from the large restaurants, various taverns, and duels in the palace, there is no possibility of quietness in those places from morning till night. Except for those places, the rest of the world is very quiet without too much light pollution. The stars in the sky are like sesame seeds, covering the entire starry sky. Watching this scenery, Carl's stirring mood for the past few days finally calmed down a bit. He can calm down and think carefully about how to proceed on the next path. Yes, in the past few days, Carl's heart has been in a state of turmoil, which is also the reason why he came to this rarely visited place. It is really difficult for him to calm down. The reason for this is also very simple. Two major events happened to Carl, making it difficult for him to calm down. The first thing is very simple, it is that he awakened the memories of his past life and broke the mystery of the fetus. The reason why Carl can be certain that he awakened the memories of his past life, rather than crossing over, is because his memory clearly remembers every detail of his reincarnation. Having such memories allows him to clearly understand everything that happened to him. It was a sunny morning, and he had just arrived at the house of his blind date to discuss the issue of the dowry. It was neither too much nor too little, and he requested that besides jewelry and watches, he remain motionless and colorful. His car has no objections from the other party. Although it is not good, it is still worth over 400,000 yuan. Of course, the reason for satisfaction is that the car is still in the running-in period. I have also looked at the house, the school district house. Although there is a loan, there is enough down payment, which only needs to be paid for 10 years. I only need to pay less than 3,000 yuan per month, and there is no pressure at all. And that day, it was the second day after he and his partner finished buying jewelry and watches. He had just withdrawn 150,000 yuan in cash, prepared to invite the other party's parents to dinner, gave the dowry, and then prepared to get married. However, there were unexpected circumstances. Just as he was waiting for a red light at an intersection, a runaway car hit the door of his cab and caught fire, giving him no chance of escaping. When he became conscious again, he swore that he would never buy a tram again until there was a breakthrough in battery technology. It was too unsafe, and of course, he had no chance to drive again in the short term. The reason is very simple, because he has already arrived at the inspection department under the judge's office, where the supervisor is Judge Liu. The reason why he came here is that he has neither great goodness nor great evil. The reward department and the punishment department have nothing to do with him. As for the in-law department, there is no chance, after all, he has already returned to the underworld. After careful investigation by Judge Liu, his good and evil situation was quickly determined, and there were no major crimes. Apart from occasionally discussing the rights and wrongs of some people behind their backs, he also occasionally did some good deeds, of course, all of them were small acts of kindness. In the end, his judgment was also good, and he could be reincarnated as a human being, but it could only be an ordinary family. There is another reason why Asgard can be reincarnated, which is the role played by the 150,000 yuan that was burned together with him. For a long time, Chinese people have had the custom of burning paper money, but little did they know that paper money that is not worth 10 yuan per dozen is useless. Only real money with the will of all beings can be useful. You need to know how much money the Chinese burn each year, and burn it according to 1/10 of the population in the country. Each person only burns a dozen or 100 denominations, which is 1 trillion yuan. Moreover, the denomination of the money is unimaginable, and how good can the underworld be? Moreover, the underworld coins are mostly made by some small workshops, so how can they be of any use? Carl vividly remembers when Lu Jian said, "You have never had any great good or evil in your life. Overall, if you have any small good, when you enter the human realm, I hope you will accumulate more good deeds in order to reincarnate into heaven and humanity, so that you can enjoy the pleasure of freedom." As he spoke, he was about to be taken away by the Yamen guard. However, at this moment, a person who looked like a master whispered something in Lu's ear. Lu then looked at him with a surprised expression on his face, and the master said, "Kid, there is now an opportunity to reincarnate into heaven and humanity. I wonder if you are interested or not. Of course, this is conditional." At that time, although Carl didn't know what the situation was, he was quite interested and said, "Please make it clear that as long as I can do it, I will do my best, but I don't know if I can do it." The person who looked like the master said, "This is also simple. It's the 150,000 yuan in your bag. As long as you are willing to hand it in, our adults can arrange a chance for you to reincarnate as a heavenly and human being. However, due to your limited merits, don't think about the heavenly beings in the East. The heavenly beings in the Western world are a good choice." Upon hearing this, Carl at the time did not understand their thoughts. He stayed in the East and reincarnated as a celestial being. Over time, if any unexpected events occurred, they would inevitably be discovered by the people above them. It was obviously difficult to explain at that time, but in the West, there were clearly no great figures who would take them seriously. This is a very clever loophole. I feel like there's something fishy going on. After all, this is Judge Liu from the judge's office, who can be considered a big shot. It's really unbelievable that he's interested in this 150,000 yuan. Of course, Carl wanted to inquire and see if he was losing money. At that time, Carl couldn't help but ask, "I wonder why the big shot wanted this 150,000 yuan." At this moment, the master also explained with a smile, "There is no one in the mortal world who can print real ghost coins anymore. The paper currency in this mortal world can be equivalent to real ghost coins and can help us practice. It is useless for you ordinary people. Your 150,000 yuan can be equivalent to 15,000 taels of Inde silver. With 10,000 Inde, you can be reincarnated into heaven and earth. The more Inde you have, the better your reincarnation. After spending 15,000 yuan of Inde and choosing Western heaven and earth, you can be reincarnated into a good family. How about that? We don't have to deceive you if we want to." Although it didn't look like it was a scam, Carl simply handed in 150,000 yuan. After all, this is what they say. Even if you don't want to give it, they will snatch it and throw it into a world like a biochemical crisis. In a few years, you will have to die and come back. After a few attempts, there will be no evidence to investigate. After all, they haven't violated any rules, and your merits are only enough to reincarnate humanity. When we arrange a slightly better family for you, even if someone checks, it can completely withstand the investigation. As long as you don't appear in front of the big shot, it will be a confusing account for a long time. Who can know what exactly happened then? That's all. Under their arrangement, Carl was reincarnated to Asgard, but now he has awakened his memory. Carl knows that he has still been tricked by someone else, and Asgard is really a big pit. Chapter 2. Good news. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The reason why Asgard is called a big pit is very simple, it is too dangerous here. If this is an Asgard from an ordinary world, then Carl must be very excited. After all, he is a divine race, and even an ordinary Asgard who has not practiced has a long lifespan of no less than 5,000 years. For example, the father of the gods, King Odin, does not know how many years and months he has lived. If he has such a lifespan, it is not a problem to say that he is a celestial being, let alone that every Asgard has divine power. However, what made Carl despair was that this was Marvel, and the reason why he could be so certain was because there was a silly Thor, the second god of thunder, and his brother Loki, who was always with him. At the same time, their team also had Vandal, Vostug, Hogun, and the goddess Sif, and most importantly, their faces were similar to what he saw in the movie, but there was also a certain gap. For example, the goddess Hive is even more beautiful than in movies. One is her height, which is at least 1.85 meters tall. The most important thing is that her figure is more explosive, with a curvaceous shape, which is completely a perfect figure. Anyway, Carl really likes it. A head of beautiful blonde hair, with no flaws on her delicate face, and her usual attire is not so conservative. Her armor, which only covers the key areas, adds a heroic temperament to her. The small waist, flat abdomen, slightly bulging muscles, slender legs, with infinite power and delicate skin, bring endless imagination. After all, she is a goddess with a religious position and is the object of admiration for most people. Moreover, it is not only beautiful, but also very powerful. Among the warriors of Asgard, it is definitely one of the top ones, with both beauty and strength. It is unknown how many Asgard people dream of being a goddess. In Karl's memory, he and many of his friends have watched countless battles of Sif. Every victory of Sif would make them scream in surprise, and every appearance of her was cheered by everyone, except for her and Thor's competition. After all, Thor's fans and sisters were also very many. Just imagining the numerous beautiful goddesses in his mind, Karl felt even more uncomfortable. After all, the 100,000 or so Asgard people have experienced the chaos after the damage of the Rainbow Bridge, the invasion of the Dark Elves, the indiscriminate slaughter of Hera, the twilight of the gods, and the slaughter of the vanquisher Thanos. In addition, there may be another snap of the fingers and the final battle, and the remaining number is only less than 3,000 people. Yes, in the end, less than 3,000 people survived. Thinking about the remaining number of people in Asgard, Karl also felt a tingling scalp and his survival rate was too low, only less than 3%. What is this concept? It's completely like the Earth has already been buried in the sky. Even with free America, the city of New York, known for its daily gun battles and frequent occurrence of major events, has a much higher chance of survival, with at least a 40% chance of survival there. Yes, the survival rate in New York is at least 40% or more. Although there are many supervillains there, they usually trouble superheroes, and there are no real massacres of civilians. This should be certain, that various gangs may cause many deaths in their daily lives, and there are not many others. This is completely different from Hela. Hela is just a random killing, as long as she doesn't submit, she will be killed directly. Even if she submits, maybe she will just kill 2 people and have fun if she's not in a good mood. And in New York, even the largest invasion war, the invasion of the Za'atari people only came to an end in a very short time, and there were also a group of superheroes to support it, which did not cause significant casualties. It is estimated that there were not as many deaths as in the Sokovia incident, which is completely incomparable to Asgard. It was the sound of the Infinite War that caused huge personnel losses. After all, it was a matter of the whole universe, not just New York. In such a situation, the tragedy of Asgard can be imagined, that is, the Zehu tribe, who came from Gamora, the adopted daughter of the vanquisher Thanos, suffered even more than Asgard. They wiped out the tribe. Recalling the memories in his mind, Karl felt powerless for a moment, feeling a deep malice lingering around him. He was definitely tricked by Lu Jian and his team, and there was no way for him to survive. After all, he is a big shot in the underworld, and the depth of his calculations is beyond the imagination of a small person like Karl. He is simply a model of borrowing a knife to kill. However, thinking about it, Karl can also understand. After all, once Karl becomes a big shot, those with intentions only need to investigate and discover the tricks behind it. At that time, both big and small can be punished and punished for a crime. At this point, according to normal circumstances, Karl could not have made any waves, and buying an Asgard identity for 150,000 would not have insulted that 150,000. After all, they are all gods, and there are still many benefits. As long as Karl doesn't awaken his memories of the past, he won't remember their transaction at all. As long as he reincarnates a few times, no one will know about this matter. Just like that joke, Mengpa wanted to be reincarnated, drank a bowl of Mengpa soup, and directly arranged for her to become Mengpa. Can Mengpa also remember it? However, due to a series of accidents, Karl accidentally broke the mystery of the fetus and knew a little too much. After all, Lu Jian and his team were not from Asgard's background, so they missed out on the power of Asgard's divine power. However, in order to overcome so many disasters, Karl has no confidence at all. After all, the enemy is too strong, and his small arms and legs are a bit unbearable. Although he has good qualifications, he still lacks confidence. You should know that the older the Asgard people are, the deeper their divine power is. For example, Odin, the father of the gods, needs to enter Odin's sleep regularly to control his divine power well. However, Karl, who is only 17 years old now, is too young. His divine power is not even as strong as Thor's. In such a situation, where is there a way to survive? Of course, there is also some good news, but based on his memory, he can be clear that both Thor and Loki are not yet 1,400 years old. If everything happens when they are 1,500 years old, then Karl has about 100 years to strengthen himself and change his destiny. Of course, he cannot be certain about this matter at all. After all, it was introduced at the beginning of the movie Thor that the Battle of Asgard and the Frost Giants took place in 965 AD. At the end of this battle, Odin, the father of the gods, brought back Loki. From the movie, Loki and Thor grew up together. It can be seen that Thor and Loki should be of similar age. After all, if Thor was already 500 years old, it was impossible not to know that Loki was adopted. That's why Karl is very restless now. After all, he has no idea how many years are left until the storyline. After all, he has never paid attention to how many years here are equivalent to Earth. He doesn't even know if it's the scriptwriter's pot or if there are actually over 100 years for him to prepare. Of course, he hopes it will be over 100 years. After all, Karl is a Marvel movie fan, and he has watched those movies several times. He is also very helpless about the chaotic timeline in the movies. Just like now, he has no idea how much time is left. Looking at the stars scattered in the sky like sesame seeds, Karl was filled with helplessness in his heart. He had no confidence at all. Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net could survive in future major events, and he also wanted to preserve Asgard's vitality as much as possible. After all, only with enough population can there be sufficient strength. Asgard is an immortal species, with a long life but also a fatal flaw, which is the difficulty of reproduction. It has been more than 1,300 years since Odin, the father of the gods, conquered the 9 realms. Asgard's population has only increased by tens of thousands, from about 50.60000 to just over 100,000, roughly doubling. That is to say, with this population, Asgard can occupy a place in the universe. If the population is less than 3,000, Asgard can only rely on others. Of course, with the protection of strong people like Thor, he can still live a relatively peaceful life. But who wouldn't want to do better? Just as he was thinking about what to do in the future, he heard a leisurely call. With the call, the voice gradually grew louder, indicating that someone was approaching quickly. Karl, where are you? Listening to the call, Karl knew that this was his childhood sweetheart and one of his father's 5 disciples, named Sylvia. Upon hearing her call, Karl descended from the cliff and walked to a small intersection, shouting in the direction of the sound, "Sylvia, I'm here," and quickly ran towards the direction of the sound. Quickly, Karl saw a very beautiful girl, who was about the same age as him. After all, she was a divine race, and very few were ugly. Of course, there were not many girls as beautiful as Sylvia. After all, she was only slightly younger than the goddess Hive in terms of body shape, and she was not yet at her best for development. The two soon met, and Sylvia, like a shell, crashed straight into Karl's arms. Chapter 3. Message. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Listening to Sylvia's rapid breathing, Karl knew that she had sprinted all the way. Based on Sylvia's estimated speed, Sylvia's speed had reached at least 40 to 50 meters per second, clearly using her current fastest speed. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been such rapid breathing, which was obviously important. At this point, we have to mention the combat power of the Asgard people. Their physique is more than 3 times that of normal Earthlings, and they are still a person who has not exercised much. And human ability can be roughly expressed in terms of power, just like an elite soldier who has a power of about 3 kilowatts. And the Asgard people, even ordinary people, actually have a power of about 10 kilowatts or more. According to the setting, their power is similar to that of Captain America Steve Rogers. Of course, Captain Rogers has a halo of 5 to 5, and anyone can force 5 to 5, even if it's to defeat the boss Thanos. And Sylvia, although about the same age as Carl, has already trained for 7 or 8 years. With the nourishment of divine power, her combat power conversion success rate is about 20 kilowatts. Running so fast is very normal. Of course, Marvel's combat power is also a mystery. In order to make the interaction between characters exciting enough, the screenwriter can only make up the truth. After all, if everything is based on data, it cannot be justified, it is too chaotic. Just like Spider-Man, in the setting, he has 20 tons of power, and 1 horsepower is roughly equivalent to 75 kilograms of power, which is about 200 kilowatts of power. In addition, he has spider sensing, so it can be said that even Spider-Man, who has not received any combat training, if he were to play Captain America, it would still be playing against children. Furthermore, in order to make the story more exciting, the Toby version of Spider-Man can pull the subway to a stop, while the Dutch version of Spider-Man can pull a ship that is split in half. Obviously, neither can be achieved by 2 kilowatts. It should be noted that the power of the subway is at least 2,000 kilowatts or more, and a cruise ship can weigh at least a few hundred tons, right? From here, it can be seen that Spider-Man's power is definitely over 1,000 kilowatts, otherwise it would not have been possible to have such great power. You should know that the Green Giant in the setting only has about 150 tons of power, which is about 1,000 kilowatts of power. This shows how chaotic Marvel's power system is. With such abilities, Spider-Man is probably the only Iron Man who can compete with him, right? After all, Iron Man's armor uses a miniaturized arc reactor. Even the first generation of arc reactors has a power of 3 billion joules per second, which means that the power of Iron Man's first generation is 3 million kilowatts. Of course, Carl feels it's unlikely. Why do you say that? The reason is also very simple. The energy consumption of steel warfare armor cannot reach this level. After all, the first generation arc reactor can only operate the Mark I for 15 minutes. Even if calculated based on the fastest speed of 3 Mach, its power cannot exceed that of the Blackbird fighter. It should be noted that the power of the Blackbird fighter is only a few thousand kilowatts. If it is 3 million kilowatts of power, then the Mark I can operate for at least dozens of days. Under simple mathematical calculations, even if the energy consumption of the Mark I is 10 times that of the Blackbird fighter jet, calculated at 100,000 kilowatts per hour, it is only 100,000 kilowatt hours, so the energy generated per second is less than 30,000 joules. Obviously, this is the playwright's pot. There are too many unreasonable reasons, and it's a bit like making up data for the sake of aesthetics. It's a bit like using the mass energy equation to completely convert 1.5 grams of palladium into energy. After all, if all 1.5 grams of palladium are converted into energy and used for 15 minutes, the energy generated per second is about 3 billion joules. This energy is equivalent to 30,000 tons of equivalent nuclear weapons, and the setting of a slap on the head is really unacceptable. Of course, let's not talk too much. To get to the point, when Sylvia calmed down her breathing and exposed her head from Carl's arms, she said, I've told you so many times, call me Brunhild. I'm going to become the most beautiful Valkyrie. Breathing in the faint scent of the girl's body, Carl replied, okay, I'll do my best, but why do you have to call Brunhild? Can't you choose a different name? Brunhild's fate is not very good. Yes, all the Valkyries were slaughtered by Hela. Can this name be auspicious? This is not the world of ordinary people, it's Asgard. Names obviously have special meanings, and it's not easy to choose a name. Maybe if she calls this name, she will have to take on a special mission. Carl doesn't want her to have such a situation. At this moment, Sylvia said, how many times have I said it? I want to become a Valkyrie, and Brunhild is the most beautiful Valkyrie. Of course, I want to become a Valkyrie like her. And in the future, I will call myself Brunhild. Don't forget to call me Brunhild again. Be careful not to hit you again, humph. Looking at Sylvia, who was holding up his small fist and threatening him, Carl could only follow her. After all, when fighting against her, Carl couldn't take a fierce hand. Although he was much more powerful than Sylvia, he could only restrain himself during the battle. So he said, "Okay, Brunhild, what can I do for you?" Upon seeing Carl soften, Sylvia said, "It is His Majesty Odin, the father of the gods, who wants to see you." The Guards of the Chapter 4. Difficulties. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sylvia looked up at this moment and asked in great confusion, "Why are you saying that? Don't you want revenge?" "I think His Majesty Odin will definitely avenge you. He is the greatest father of the gods." Seeing Sylvia's excited expression, Carl could only lightly stroke her back and say, "Of course I want revenge, but we obviously cannot do it. If we sacrifice more than 90% of our tribe to defeat the Kree, it would be a bit more than worth the loss. His Majesty Odin obviously cannot do this, which is unfair to other tribes." Sylvia's eyes dimmed as she saw Carl say this, and she couldn't help but ask, "So how do we seek revenge?" Carl is also in a difficult situation. Yes, it's too difficult to seek revenge. The strength of the Kree people is too strong. Even if Asgard has a Star Destroyer weapon like the Rainbow Bridge, it's difficult to compete with the Kree people. After all, the Rainbow Bridge cannot attack thousands of targets at once. Once Asgard uses this weapon, the Kree people will definitely have to counterattack comprehensively. The results will be really unpredictable. You should know that the Kree people's star-class warships can also annihilate stars. The battleships featured in the movie are quite rare, with the Templar II of vanquishing Thanos and the Dark Star of Ronan being relatively large heavy battleships. However, these battleships are only planetary class, and the star-class battleships are generally invisible to most people. They are used as flagship ships for large fleets and are usually watched by the enemy. Carl thought for a moment and said, "I'm afraid we can only find a solution on our own now, but there's not much hope of revenge in the short term. Our biggest thing now is to improve our strength. Only when we are strong enough can we possibly seek revenge. Your Majesty cannot go to war for my parents and a few of them with the Kree people." Carl has watched so many Marvel movies, and although the Kree are currently at war with the Skurus and the Nova Empire, they have always been in an advantageous position. In this situation, even if Asgard participates in the war, there is no benefit. After all, there are too few Asgard people, and having so many planets is completely useless. Moreover, Carl still has some understanding of Odin. Firstly, Odin is too old. Every time he makes a move, he is probably risking his own life and may send himself away at any time. How could he possibly make a move? Currently, Thor does not have the strength and wisdom to be a good king, let alone Hela. Secondly, Odin saw too many deaths. Although Carl didn't read many books in the past, he also vaguely knew that during the conquest of the Nine Realms, Asgard had killed at least 20,000 to 30,000 people, which can be said to have wiped out a generation. This is also the reason why he suddenly ended his campaign and allowed Ma to go free. In order to no longer fight, he even exiled his daughter, Princess Hyla. Now, how could he once again make the people of Asgard pick up weapons to fight against the even stronger Kree Empire? If he really wanted to attack the Kree people, how could he end his campaign back then? So Carl's parents will only be like the soldiers who were killed during Thor's accession ceremony, giving a certain amount of compensation, and then settling down. Of course, the compensation given by the Kree people to Asgard will not be too low. After all, although Asgard is small in number, he is indeed a powerful force in the universe that most people do not want to provoke. Asgard's magical technology is very advanced, first and foremost being artifacts. By combining artifacts with warships, they can give them intelligence to assist in various operations, including attacks. Although the total number of warships cannot be compared to the Kree people, there are also thousands of them. Although they are smaller, their combat power cannot be underestimated. In addition to divine weapons, energy weapons and energy shield technology are also not inferior. Individual weapons can be used as both energy weapons and cold weapons. However, Asgard people generally do not like to use individual energy weapons for a simple reason. Individual energy weapons consume too much divine power, and even if magic energy blocks are installed, their effectiveness is not as good as that of directly using divine weapons. Therefore, there is an image of Asgard people loving to use cold weapons. Of course, the most important thing is that Asgard has a Star Destroyer weapon, also known as the Rainbow Bridge. If we engage in a full-scale war with the Kree, it is not possible to defeat them. However, it is still very likely to use force and kill billions of Kree people. At that time, it is estimated that Asgard people will be very few left. After all, there are too many Kree people. In addition to these, the most important thing is the Asgard people themselves. A normal soldier, equipped with a complete set of weapons, can basically deal with the Kree people with one enemy, 1,000 or even more. If it is not directly hit by the powerful weapons of warships, it is difficult for the Kree people's individual weapons to kill the Asgard people. After all, the individual energy weapons of the Kree people are basically unable to break through the armor defense of Asgard. The armor of regular Asgard soldiers has magical protection and divine blessings, and only the truly strong are the best way to deal with Asgard people. Otherwise, it is difficult to kill Asgard people, which is also common knowledge in the universe. Upon hearing Karl's words, Sylvia couldn't help but hold her tighter and said, "Karl, whether your majesty will avenge us or not, I will accompany you. I swear in the name of Odin, the father of the gods." Feeling Sylvia's true feelings, Karl couldn't help but feel a warmth in his heart. The experience of dozens of blind dates in his past memories made him cherish Sylvia's true feelings. At this moment, he also held her tightly, enjoying the warmth under the starry sky. This is what Karl must do everything to protect. Although he has lost his loved ones, there is still her. After a while, Sylvia said, "You're not here today. The three brothers of Sar have all found their mentors again. Should we go teach them a lesson? The teacher just passed away, and they all left without saying a word to you." The three brothers of Sal were newly recruited disciples of Karl's father, all of whom were not very old. They were the members of the team that Karl had trained for him and hoped to form a team with him in the future. When Sylvia mentioned this, Karl said, "Brynhild, it's normal for them to find a new master. They're still young, and our father hasn't had time to teach them too much. We're not very old, let alone inexperienced, and it's difficult to teach them well. The teaching in Asgard is generally based on the model of mentoring and apprenticeship. The reason is simple. There are too few Asgard people, and the average number of newborns born each year is only 20.30. Except for some basic knowledge, most of the teaching relies on mentors or parents. It should be noted that the system here is only equivalent to the Middle Ages. As for Karl's father being able to recruit so many disciples among such a small number of people, the reason is also very simple. He is much stronger than most ordinary Asgards, and of course, he cannot compare with the elites. After all, others are gods with titles, such as Shurfu. They are land and harvest goddesses, and besides being warriors, they also have divine blessings. You should know that divine blessing is a very profound application of divine power, which is not something that ordinary Asgards can master. Just like in Thor 4, a simple blessing from Thor gave dozens of children the power of Thor, and that blessing gave those children the strength no less than that of elite warriors. Another reason is Karl's mother, who is a therapist and can prepare potions. With her presence, it can basically ensure that the child is not harmed, and of course, it can make more people willing to entrust their child to them for education. At this moment, Sylvia said, "What should we do when we form a team in the future? We only have 2 people, and usually a small team needs 5 people, and the 5 people need to be able to cooperate with each other. If we don't adjust now, it will be difficult for us to form a small team in the future. This way, it will be difficult for us to take on tasks in the future. Do we need to join the army? Karl also found it difficult to hear this. Without him, Asgard's social system was roughly equivalent to the Middle Ages. Although they were gods, they had to complete a certain amount of tasks every year, just like Randolph, an Asgard who was stranded on Earth in the Divine Shield Agency. He was a stonemason and had to complete the tasks assigned by the Golden Palace. Karl and Sylvia, on the other hand, also have to complete various tasks as adults, and there are many tasks that are somewhat dangerous, such as mining. Asgard's main source of income is mining, selling scarce minerals or extracted elements, and of course, there are also magic energy blocks, which can serve as power for many engines. As for scarce minerals, many of them are in very dangerous places without certain strength, and basic tasks may not be completed every year. Karl also frowned at this moment. He understood his father's plan, which was that after Karl reached adulthood, his disciples could form a small team with him and be led by him, which would be most beneficial to Karl. However, it is obviously impossible now unless the two of them are willing to team up with others, but this way they will lose the initiative and may be bullied by others in the team. After all, everyone will have selfish intentions. Karl was also very helpless about this matter and could only say, "We can only wait for a while and see if we can find suitable people to form a team." Joining someone else's team casually is definitely not suitable. We still have a few years left. In the current situation, Karl has no other good way besides waiting and strengthening his cultivation. After all, this is not only his business, but also Sylvia's business. He cannot let Sylvia be bullied, but also needs to find ways to survive. He still has revenge and wants to survive the snap of Thanos' finger. Chapter 5. Inner Alchemy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As it got late, Karl pulled Sylvia towards the residential area. Yes, they could only run. The Asgard people usually travel on horses or small spaceships, and neither of them was prepared. However, they are both Asgard people, and their physical fitness is not comparable to that of ordinary people. Although they are both relatively heavy, their strength is also really strong. Sylvia has a power equivalent to around 20 kilowatts, while Karl has at least 30.40 kilowatts, so running 10 to 20 kilometers is really a warm up for them. Taking Sylvia home, Karl quickly ran back home. He has now fully absorbed his past memories and wants to try the cultivation method in his mind. The cultivation method in his memory is internal alchemy, with the ultimate goal of forming golden pills. There is no good way to quickly improve his strength now, except for collecting infinite gems, which is the internal alchemy in his memory. Collecting infinite gems is obviously not a wise move. Although he knows the whereabouts of all gems, his strength cannot withstand the power of the gems. He is as strong as vanishing the overlord Thanos, who has been destroyed by the energy of the gems. Moreover, Karl, a little Karami, is estimated to be able to waste half of his strength with just one gemstone. His strength is really not allowed. Of course, if it really takes over 100 years to reach the storyline now, then space gemstones can still be planned. After all, compared to other gemstones, space gemstones are obviously the least dangerous, and before World War II, space gemstones were always in reliefs at a temple in Tønsberg, southeastern Norway, so it's best to find them. If given the opportunity, Karl wouldn't mind giving it a try. After all, other gemstones are not too dangerous or impossible for Karl. First of all, time gemstones. In the hands of Kamatage Supreme Mage Gu-E, although it's unclear how strong Gu-E is, can a person who can wrestle with the dimensional demon god be weak? The soul gem is in the hands of Thanos, although it is uncertain whether it is present or not. It is obvious that Karl is seeking death when facing Thanos. Thanos' strength should be slightly weaker than Odin's, no less than Thor holding the Storm Axe. The reality gemstones involve the Dark Elves, and once they are born, they must be prepared to fight against them. Karl estimates that the large number of casualties among the Asgard people may be related to this matter. It should be noted that Malkis has directly attacked the interior of the Golden Palace, killing Queen Freja. Is this possible that the casualties are only a few dozen? Although the power gem is located in a temple on the planet Morag, it is clearly the most dangerous of these gems. Those who cannot bear it will be directly burned to ashes, and Carl has no confidence in withstanding that power. After all, Carl is very weak now. Not to mention Spider-Man, he probably is just wrestling with Black Widow Natasha. After all, like Captain America Steve Rogers, it's really not guaranteed that he can beat him. The soul gem is not to mention, on the planet of Vermeer, but it requires sacrificing one's beloved. Carl is not a madman, so why would he do such a thing for the soul gem? After all, it is the best to obtain the space gem. As for the impact on the timeline, to be honest, he is really not sure if he will provoke the Time Variation Management Bureau. After all, he has not had much influence on the timeline yet. However, if his strength allows, he still wants to try it. If everything is a predetermined fact, what is the point? He doesn't want to die in 100 years. Of course, it is not realistic for him to find the space gem now. He is still underage and it is almost impossible for him to go to Earth. First of all, there is the Rainbow Bridge, and Thor can use it almost casually. Even if he wants to go to the Frost Giant Kingdom of Jotunheim, Heimdall can release it, but he is a prince and Carl is just a commoner. If he wants to use it, he must obtain approval. Even if he applies now, it is unlikely that he will be allowed. Of course, he can also go to the cave that Loki found, but how dare Carl use it casually now? One is that it may provoke Loki, but he is someone who can stab others in the back. Where can Carl provoke it? He's not Saul, Loki wouldn't care. Secondly, there is Heimdall. Carl does not have profound magic to deceive Heimdall's eyes. Once used, he will definitely be discovered, and the lightest punishment may be to stay in prison for a few years, which is not worth the loss. At present, for Carl, besides his diligent cultivation, the only way out is through inner alchemy. When it comes to inner alchemy, it is necessary to mention its origin. It can be said that inner alchemy originated in the pre-Qin period, and is said to have been first proposed by Guangchengzi. It is mentioned in both Zhuangzi and Huangdi Neijing. The main method at that time was ignoring the lack of hearing, embracing the spirit with stillness. The form will be self-correcting, it will be clear, without laboring your form, without shaking your essence, it can be reborn. The emphasis was on be cautious in guarding your body, things will strengthen themselves, I will guard one of them, in order to balance them. The cultivation methods were very simple, at most mentioned in some pre-Qin works such as the Tao Te Ching, Zhuangzi, Xing Qi Yu Pei inscription, etc., but there were not many advanced cultivation methods. With the development of the times, during the Qin and Han dynasties, the first emperor pursued immortality, which led to the development of the external alchemy technique, which emphasizes the use of ore to refine alchemy. Cases of death due to ingestion of cinnabar are not uncommon. It is said that there is an external chapter in Biopuzi, which refers to the external alchemy technique. However, it has now been lost, which can be considered a good thing. More people will die if it is not lost. During the Wei, Jin, Southern and Northern dynasties, as well as the Sui and Tang dynasties, the external alchemy gradually declined. Combining with the external alchemy, the internal alchemy was proposed. The internal alchemy emphasizes the cultivation of life and soul. The alchemy scriptures often refer to lead, tiger, water, etc., while mercury, dragon, and fire generally refer to life. The essence of inner alchemy is to use the human body as the cauldron, the essence and spirit as the medicine, the breath as the wind, and the mind as the fire. The degree of using the mind and breath as the fire condition, and the combination of essence and spirit as the returning pill. In the Southern Song and Yuan Ming dynasties, the inner alchemy reached its peak. You will find that the concept of the inner alchemy became higher and the methods became more and more complex. From the beginning, it was just to maintain tranquility, to later requiring 10 steps, from refining oneself and building a foundation to facing the wall, etc. Of course, this also conforms to the law of development of things, from simple to complex. As for why the Southern Song dynasty reached its peak from the Yuan and Ming dynasties, it is also a historical inevitability. After all, from the Southern Song dynasty to the Yuan dynasty, too many people did not see hope, and even in the Yuan dynasty, the Han people became the fourth class, unable to even take their names, just like when a person's surname was Zhu, the eldest was Zhuda, and the second was Zhu'er. Such situations are common, and there is nothing more to do without practicing immortality. This situation is also very clearly reflected in poetry. From the pre-Qin to the Northern Song dynasty, poetry mainly described life, scenery, and aspirations, with few discussing the cultivation of immortals and Taoism. In the Southern Song and Yuan dynasties, poetry about cultivation of immortals was a centralized explosion, and the reason for this is also imaginable. In addition to poetry, it is also reflected in novels. Among the four great classical novels, Journey to the West is considered a spiritual book that combines the three religions. Some even believe that this book was written by Qiu Chuji, and that Chen Shibin, son of Shan Yin Wu, interpreted Journey to the West as a spiritual book. Dream of the Red Chamber is also interpreted as an interpretation of the Heart Sutra. However, this development has also brought a lot of trouble to Carl, which is that he doesn't know who to believe. Yes, their opinions are diverse, and the key gateway cannot be determined exactly where it is. Some people believe that it is the three elixirs, pituitary gland, human center, and the seabed 1 inch below the elixir. Not only that, some people have also proposed that the entrance is a door, neither inside nor outside the body. It can appear whenever it is necessary, anywhere it is possible. It is simply as outrageous as it is. Of course, some people have given a different understanding. Since guarding everywhere is wrong, it is better to find a place outside the body. For example, the Zhilong sleeping pill technique provides a method for fixing the void, where the entrance is 1 inch outside the nose. This is quite similar to the meaning of the Brahma chakra in the Indian yoga system of the 3 meridians and 7 chakras, because in the yoga system of the 3 meridians and 7 chakras, it is believed that there is another chakra directly above the head, which is the Brahma chakra. It is estimated that the Vajra Mahayana also drew inspiration from this, right? In addition to the concept of the entrance, the concept of true yang was also proposed. When the intention to guard the entrance is not intentional, it will produce true yang. The concept of unintentional is innate, intentional is acquired, was also proposed. Seeing this, Carl actually has a feeling of observing the photon double-slit interference experiment. Observing and not observing are completely two different states. Of course, some people have also proposed the method of practicing visualization. When there are distractions in the mind, just imagine them until all the distractions are eliminated. In short, there are various methods of practicing, and various Dan books are overwhelming. Carl has probably browsed through no less than 50 books. The biggest problem with these books is that they are completely out of touch with each other, all talking to themselves. For example, many people use the Wuzhen chapter as their theoretical basis, but the methods they write may be contradictory. They all say that the public is reasonable, while the public is reasonable. They really don't know who to trust. No matter how high the intention is, the ultimate focus is on cultivating truth through false means. Whether it's true yang or lead mercury, the ultimate goal is to return the elixir. However, this also brings an indelible key point, which is the source of energy. Even if it's as big as a grain of millet as Zhang Sanfeng said, it should weigh 1 gram. Chapter 6. First Practice. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This gram of material is quite abundant, completely derived from various imaginary chi or essence and spirit, which involves the materialization of energy. 1 gram of material contains energy equivalent to 20,000 tons of equivalent nuclear weapons. After all, a 10,000-ton equivalent nuclear weapon only consumes less than 0.5 grams of material. Although with many doubts, Carl from his past life also wanted to try, what if he succeeded? However, it is said that this mentality is not acceptable. If you don't even believe that you can succeed by taking advantage of fake cultivation, how can you possibly succeed? Nevertheless, Carl still chose a modern cultivation method, which is said to have been passed down by Kunlun to try out the 9 Flowers Golden Book. At that time, he didn't know if it was really effective, but he just tried to practice according to the methods introduced in the book, and never had much hope. In the end, the result was just closing his eyes in the darkness and being bright in front of him. As for why he chose this one, it was only because it was easier to understand compared to the Dan Shu of the Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties. Therefore, he gave up works such as Zhong Lv, by Yuchan, the southern and northern two schools, the Sanfeng school, Huang Yuanji, Li Hanshu, and so on. Their works were too obscure to be explained in this one. Of course, the intention of this article is indeed very high. In terms of intention alone, there are still some desirable aspects in this article, but it is hard to say whether it is feasible or not. In theory, the higher the intention, the more difficult it should be. After all, the difficulty is definitely proportional to the harvest. It is impossible for you to achieve too high a harvest by practicing casually. Otherwise, wouldn't this immortal run all over the ground? You should know that there are really many people who have the intention to practice, but too many people cannot enter through the door. Upon returning home, Carl ate some simple food and then washed himself up. First, he looked up at the starry sky in his yard, let go of his mood, and after calming down, he was ready to return to his house and practice according to the law. The inheritance of inner alchemy has been passed down to this day. Before practicing, the first thing to do is to cultivate oneself and cultivate one's mind. Practicing oneself means adjusting one's body and mind to the best state of practicing inner alchemy. In one word, it means being completely spiritual and full of energy, so that medicine can be produced. It is also the foundation of all cultivation. No matter which alchemy scripture, there is no difference. Of course, while practicing oneself, one also needs to practice the mind. After all, the origin of inner alchemy originated in the pre-Qin period. The first point of cultivation is to be calm and clear, only in this way can one ensure successful cultivation. With too much distractions, how can one regulate one's body and mind well? Especially for various desires, if we cannot control them, when practicing, we will be led towards confusion by these desires, and how can we succeed? At this moment, Carl's mood was truly at its peak. Firstly, he broke the mystery of the fetus and learned too many secrets. Secondly, his parents' accidents were all major events. But breaking the mystery in the womb and gaining previous cultivation experience, it is possible to make adjustments. After arriving in the bedroom, Carl sat naturally, closed his eyes lightly, relaxed his mind, and slowly let go of distractions. When his mood calmed down, Carl began his initial practice. The first step of this cultivation method is called the Ganlu wash heart technique, which aims to train oneself and wash the heart, enabling people to meet the requirements of building a foundation. After calming down, Carl began to gently gather his consciousness in front of his eyes, that is, to gather it in front of his eyebrows for a while, then slightly retract it and inject it into his brain. At this time, his consciousness was in the center of his brain. Next, without thinking, I remained indifferent to nature until it seemed as if everything had returned to nothingness. Then imagine the void and blue sky filled with crystal clear nectar, continuously dripping towards oneself from above. Imagine these nectars gradually washing away all the impurities of oneself, and finally becoming a pure white jade. At the end of cultivation, it feels like nectar filling the whole body, feeling smooth and flawless, with a sense of tranquility and peace throughout the body. This is considered to have completed this stage of cultivation and laid a solid foundation for building a foundation. Due to his previous experience, Carl quickly entered a state of mind. However, during his practice, he encountered a different accident, which was that he really felt liquid dripping onto his head, which quickly melted into his body. During this process, the area where the liquid droplets fell on his head and his consciousness really felt like there was light. In a pitch-black sea of consciousness, as if a few stars were lit up, although not bright, it was so real. And this feeling continued to spread, and after experiencing it, Carl was also surprised because this situation had never happened in his previous life. It was a completely different feeling, and he felt like it was raining. Carl can be certain that there is no possibility of rain leaking from his home. Although his house is not entirely made of gold like the Golden Palace, the roof is also made of a whole stone slab carved by a stonemason, making it impossible for rain to leak. Moreover, there has been a situation of lighting up the sea of consciousness. Quickly opening his eyes and looking up, the real situation truly shocked Carl. Yes, he actually saw the divine power originating from Asgard forming small droplets on his head, floating and sinking like mist, and what had just dropped onto his head were these droplets formed by the mist, which had never happened before. Carl had never heard of this situation with his father. However, seeing this situation, Carl's mood was really difficult to calm down. The energy source problem that the previous world could not understand was solved in this way. Yes, Asgard is full of divine power everywhere, but no one can gather it normally. Today's situation is definitely not unique, and it is estimated that Odin, the father of the gods, may not have seen it before. Slowly, without guidance, the small droplets began to dissipate slowly. After only a few breaths, all the divine power dissipated into the air. The reason why Carl can be certain that this is divine power is simple. It is the same as the power he absorbs from Asgard every day, and every Asgard person absorbs such divine power. After absorbing divine power, different divine powers will be generated based on physical constitution or bloodline, just like Thor, who, like the king of gods Odin, possesses the power of thunder, and other titled main gods also possess corresponding divine powers. To be honest, Asgard is truly magical enough. Anyone who is in Asgard can receive divine power from Asgard at all times, even if they are not in Asgard. For this situation, Carl also doesn't understand the reason. After all, his strength and knowledge are too shallow, and he knows too little. Former Chen is just an ordinary person who loves Marvel movies. This kind of situation has never happened before, and the screenwriter's creation is full of loopholes. How can he explain these situations? However, for him now, this is undoubtedly very good news. The first part of the Ganlu Wash Mind technique can now be called the Divine Power Wash Body Mind technique, and the divine power he received just now is about half of what he receives every day. This is definitely a very exaggerated number. For an ordinary Asgard, the amount of divine power absorbed every day is very small, which is why ordinary Asgards rarely directly attack with divine power. Carl once heard his father say that the divine power that Thor can absorb every day is at least hundreds or thousands of times that of him, and basically every royal family is like this. The Asgard people who can have titles can absorb divine power at a speed that is at least tens or hundreds of times faster than Carl's father, and the difference is not ordinary. And today, Carl saw the direction of progress. Yu reading book www.yuyukeungshu.net. Yes, it's inner alchemy. I didn't expect the effect to be so good. It can make Carl absorb divine power at the lowest speed with a title. It should be noted that Carl used to absorb very little divine power every day. Just like now, when Carl mobilizes all divine power to use artifacts to emit rays, he has to lose power in about 10 times at most. However, using artifacts directly as cold weapons allows him to use them non-stop for several days before consuming all his energy. This is the reason why he does not directly use divine power attacks. The reason why he can continue to fight like this is also very simple. Asgard is constantly supplying him with divine power. If he only uses cold weapons to fight, 70.8% of his consumption can be replenished at any time. This situation was unimaginable for Carl, and his face was incredibly bright. He was fooled by it. Yes, with this experience, the biggest stone in Carl's heart fell to the ground, and he had a clear goal for his future development direction. The first step was to obtain the golden elixir. At that time, his strength was definitely not low. After a moment of excitement, Carl began to continue his practice. Slowly, the mist of divine power condensed again, and small droplets began to drip slowly. He also began to secretly count, wanting to see how many divine droplets could condense every day. With the passage of time, Carl had been practicing for over an hour. At this moment, he suddenly felt a feeling of overeating. Yes, it was a feeling of overeating. Feeling this situation, Carl also had a clear understanding in his heart. Today, the demand for divine power has reached its limit. If he doesn't stop, he won't be able to absorb divine power anymore. After slowly stopping, Carl's heart was filled with joy. During his recent practice, he absorbed about 2,000 drops of divine power, which was about 500 times more than his usual absorption. This was definitely a very exaggerated amount. Chapter 7 ends up. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Feeling the abundant divine power in his body, Carl lay in bed for a long time without sleep. Today is definitely a memorable day. With such a good thing, his strength can definitely grow rapidly, far surpassing his peers and even many people several hundred years older than him. It is not impossible for him to become a strong person like Saul and Odin one day. After all, cultivation has just begun, and the speed of absorbing divine power has increased by hundreds of times compared to the past. In the future, building foundations and even forming golden pills will be so fast. You can understand this account by thinking about it. The next morning, Carl got up and started practicing every day. This was his daily routine after the age of 10, starting with physical exercise. The Asgard people absorb divine power every day, which needs to be digested, that is, let the body absorb it. Otherwise, too much divine power will accumulate in the body. Like old Odin, he cannot use divine power and even needs to enter Odin's sleep to slowly digest the excess divine power. This is obviously not what Carl wants. Carl was exercising his body as usual, but as he did, he slowly frowned. Yes, he realized the problem was that he was really overeating and couldn't digest much of the divine power in his body. As he exercises, the amount of divine power he consumes is similar to his usual level. If this continues, if he wants to digest the divine power in his body completely, it will definitely be calculated in years, otherwise he won't be able to digest it at all. His training volume is too low. Feeling the situation inside his body, Carl understood that he needed to increase his training. First, he took off the weight on his body and put on the weight that his father often used. As he put on the weight one by one, Carl felt immense pressure. His father's weight was too heavy for him. These loads combined are estimated to weigh at least 1.5 tons, while Carl usually only uses 100 kilograms, which is a direct increase of more than 10 times. With the weight on his body, Carl also began basic exercises such as running, punching, kicking, squatting, push-ups, sit-ups, and so on. As the exercise began, Carl clearly felt the acceleration of his absorption of divine power. Of course, this load was too heavy for him. Normally, he could reach 50.60 meters per second, but now, he can't even reach 20 meters per second. It's just that this weight is too heavy and has already affected his movements. Gradually, sunshine began to appear, and Sylvia arrived at Carl's house on time. She usually came here at this time to train with Carl. Of course, in the past, there were also Carl's senior brothers and the 3 brothers of Sal. Today, only Sylvia is here, and no one else can be here anymore. Thinking about it, her mood feels a bit uncomfortable. Looking at Carl, who was sweating profusely, Sylvia looked hesitant. As soon as Carl saw her like this, he didn't understand what she was worried about, so he said to her, "Don't worry about me. I didn't act recklessly, but during today's exercise, I clearly felt that my weight was a bit too light, so I changed to this outfit. Sylvia said anxiously at this moment, you are currently using the weight of the teacher. I know that weight is about 15 times that of you. How could you add so much weight at once? You would get hurt. I know you really want to avenge the teacher, but this definitely won't work. The teacher said we need to proceed step by step. When Carl saw Sylvia say this, he also replied, no, you don't know. At this age, our men's strength will have a period of explosive growth. You should know that you were stronger than me when you were young, and now I have surpassed you. You must work hard, my strength will rise very quickly. Sure enough, upon hearing this, Sylvia was immediately taken off guard and said, don't be too proud too early. I will definitely catch up with you again. I want to become the next most beautiful and strongest Valkyrie, Brunhild. Looking at Sylvia speaking boldly, Carl agreed, yes, you're Brunhild. By the way, are you really not planning to call Sylvia back? I still feel that Sylvia sounds better, and I'm used to it. I'm really not used to changing your name casually. At this moment, Sylvia became conflicted and continued for a while, but I really want to become a Valkyrie like Brunhild. How about you adapt slowly first? If you really don't adapt, I'll change back. Looking at the struggling Sylvia, Carl could only say, alright, let's call it this way for now. But if you want to become a strong warrior like the Valkyrie, you have to work hard. Now you are far from the Valkyrie. I think if you are 10 times stronger, you should be able to barely reach the worst Valkyrie. How about that? Do you still have confidence? After listening to Carl's words, Sylvia said solemnly, of course, not to mention 10 times, even 20 times, I can achieve it. I want to become the strongest Valkyrie, I am Brunhild. Listening to her second-year speech, Carl also urged her to start exercising quickly. After all, just shouting slogans cannot become a Valkyrie, and Sylvia is not only very beautiful, but also has good qualifications. Carl doesn't want any accidents to happen to her in the future. With practical skills, it is obvious that various situations will be less likely to occur. You should know that Asgard is truly the most tragic race. Compared to the Olympian gods, it's really like Wang Shower celebrating the Chinese New Year, with each year declining. It reached its peak in the year Thor inherited the throne, followed by the Nine Realms Rebellion, the invasion of Dark Elves, and finally, by the sound of Thanos, it became a cosmic refugee in just a few years. However, not long after exercising, Sylvia suddenly asked, where did you see the record of Valkyrie's strength? How could I not find it? How can you be certain that by increasing my strength 10 times, I can become Valkyrie? Upon hearing this question, Carl certainly couldn't tell her that he knew Valkyrie was still alive in the Valkyrie Legion. After all, the records related to Valkyrie had been erased because they involved Hela. If he said it, then he really can't explain, and there's also the voyeur Heimdall around, so many things can't be said. However, he also had an excuse, so he said, I don't know, but think about Shifu. She is the strongest female warrior now, and I think she should not be inferior to the Valkyrie. She is probably more than 10 times stronger than you now. Sylvia's face darkened as she heard him talk about Hive, and she said, I knew you all liked Hive. I'm sure I'll catch up with him, so just wait. She then began to exercise seriously. When Carl saw this situation, he didn't know she was jealous. Of course, he wanted to comfort her. Although Shifu was really beautiful, it was obvious that Sylvia, her childhood sweetheart, was more important now. So he said, why, you don't have confidence? Do you feel like you can't compare to her? You're not like that in my mind. Looking at Sylvia looking at him, Carl continued, always confident, always so energetic, nothing can defeat you. It's not like now, feeling inferior to others. Sylvia really enjoyed this trick, and then she started shouting slogans and exercising. When she saw Sylvia returning to her original state, Carl continued to ask, when will I go to the Golden Palace to see her? Yesterday only mentioned the need to attend the Golden Palace today, without specifying a specific time. Of course, Carl needs to figure it out. He is just an ordinary Asgard, and in the Middle Ages, at most, he was a knight under the name of a free citizen or noble. He dare not neglect his Majesty Odin, the father of the gods. He is not Thor and can receive enough tolerance. Seeing Carl talk about the main matter, Sylvia said, "Just let's go after breakfast as usual." Carl estimated that around 9 o'clock in the morning should be just right. They usually exercise until around 8 o'clock, which is about 3 hours, then take a shower and eat. Around 9 o'clock, they go to the library to read and study. In the afternoon, there is a practical class, and now there is no one else, so it is his practice with Sylvia. In the evening, it's free time for activities. In the past, they would wander around or go to the arena to have a look. Every night, there would be people competing in the arena. In the past few days, due to breaking the mystery of pregnancy and an accident with Carl's parents, Carl has not been exercising and studying normally for a few days. Today, he will also start to return to normal. Time flies, and in the pursuit of each other, the exercise ends. However, Carl frowned a bit. Yes, he found that only half of the divine power he absorbed last night was absorbed by his body. At this pace, he basically needs at least 10 hours of high-intensity exercise to absorb all the divine power. And now, it is almost impossible for him to bear a higher specification of weight. The weight has already exceeded his load-bearing capacity, and no matter how heavy it is, it may cause him injury. This efficiency is too low. Now Carl can clearly feel that he is really overeating. If he continues like before, he can only practice once every 2 to 3 days. According to the current absorption efficiency of 2,000 drops of divine power each time, it will take at least 10 years to achieve the required method of washing the whole body, which is too long. There is not much time left for him now, and he cannot waste any time, otherwise he will die 10 times without life. Chapter 8. Methods. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Of course, in his current situation, his strength growth will be very fast, probably slower than the main deity with a title. However, Carl is obviously very dissatisfied with this speed. The enemies he will face in the future are very powerful, and no one is worse than the main deity with a title. Basically, they are all stronger than them, such as Malkis, Surtel, Hela, Sanos, and so on. Which of them is not stronger than the main deity with a title? So, while Carl was washing his clothes, he was thinking and trying to find a better way to digest his divine power. Otherwise, he would have to practice the divine power wash body-mind technique once every 3 days, which would greatly slow down the speed of his strength improvement. After some contemplation, Carl realized that the knowledge he had learned from his parents and teachers did not include these. It seemed that he could only find ways from his past memories. After all, he had seen many fantasy works at that time. So he remained silent until he reached the restaurant. Sylvia couldn't help but hold his hand and asked, "Carl, is there any problem? You rarely do this. Let me help you think about it together." Seeing Sylvia's worried expression, Carl said, "It's nothing. I'm thinking of ways to accelerate the efficiency of our absorption of divine power. You know, we actually absorb divine power every moment. As long as we digest it in time, the amount of divine power we can absorb every day can at least increase by 3 to 5 times. Upon hearing Carl pondering this question, Sylvia's eyes lit up. When they were practicing, they were all stuck in the limits of their bodies, and too much would harm their bodies. In such a situation, the amount of divine power they absorbed every day was quite limited, and they didn't even have the speed that Asgard transmitted to them. Of course, this is also the reason why ordinary Asgard people have a low efficiency in absorbing divine power, and they don't know how those main gods absorb it. Sylvia asked, "Have you come up with any good ideas? I also want to become stronger quickly." Carl said, somewhat discouraged at this moment, "There is actually a method that comes to mind, which is to increase gravity. We can only exercise our bodies and it is difficult to exercise our internal organs. If we can practice in a higher gravity environment and add weight, then our efficiency in absorbing divine power will definitely be enhanced. Yes, Carl searched through many memories in his mind and selected several feasible methods. One was about the big and small Zhou Tian. Unfortunately, he only browsed through them at the time and was not sure about the operation of the big and small Zhou Tian. After all, he did not record the meridians and acupoints, and blindly practicing would definitely lead to problems, which is not advisable. Carl also sighed. Who made him feel that the inner alchemy he was looking for didn't have a clear understanding of the big and small Zhou Tian. Moreover, what made him most frustrated was that he could only remember the techniques he had practiced until he built the foundation. He only browsed through the subsequent techniques because he hadn't practiced them yet, which left a slight impression on him, but he didn't remember it clearly. He probably had to go to Earth to find the subsequent techniques. However, Carl estimates that if he completes the first step of cultivation and cleanses his entire body, he should be able to find all the meridians and acupoints. In this way, he can continue to advance based on the original energy flow in the meridians, thus completing the cycle of heaven. It is believed that this is the true nature of Taoism. Don't think this is impossible. The human meridians must be constantly running, otherwise a person will definitely have problems. Practicing or not practicing is probably just a difference in running speed, meridian width, and energy density. The second method is the method used in anime, such as the Chi in the Dragon Ball, which actively distributes the absorbed divine power throughout the body like Chi, guiding the divine power into cells. This method may or may not be effective, and after using it, the outcome is unknown. Therefore, Carl needs to try it bit by bit, which will take a long time, obviously not in line with the current situation. He needs to be able to become stronger at the fastest speed possible. Finally, there is the gravity cultivation method, also derived from the 7 Dragon Balls. This method can exercise all parts of the body, including the internal organs, which obviously can better promote the absorption of divine power in the body. After all, even Asgard people have almost no exercise for the internal organs, and this method is very useful for all Asgard people. Upon hearing Carl come up with a solution, Sylvia's eyes lit up and she couldn't help but ask, how can we increase gravity? I remember there were gravity generators on spacecraft from other planets, do we need to use them? Carl saw that Sylvia thought of a gravity generator, so he continued, there are 3 ways to achieve an increase in gravity. One is gravitonium, a special substance that can only be produced in small quantities on very few planets. If there is this, only a small amount of energy is needed to generate gravity, but gravitonium is too precious. Carl knows that there are gravitonium on Earth, and in the drama, Divine Shield Agent, gravitonium appears. However, it needs to be found on Earth, which is obviously not something that Carl can obtain now. Even if he buys Carl, he doesn't have the money to buy it. Although he hasn't liquidated his own assets, he thinks it's just a few million universe coins. Although the social system in Asgard is backward, everyone may have to do some very boring work, such as mining, chiseling stones, planting, brewing wine, spinning, and making clothes, etc. They are relatively wealthy, with each family ranging from tens or millions to hundreds or millions, which is even richer for commoners, gods, and so on. Carl also continued, besides the gravity generator, there are only technology-tested gravity generators and magic side runes. Gravity generators are easy to buy as long as you have money, but there is one problem with them. Gravity generators are not expensive, but the energy used by gravity generators is very expensive. Just to maintain gravity, its energy consumption is not lower than that of power engines. If we cover our training ground, the cost can be imagined to be high. If Carl were to use it, he would only increase the gravity by double, which would probably cost at least tens of thousands of universe coins per year. This is not a small amount of money. A shuttle that can traverse wormholes for space travel would cost tens of thousands of universe coins, and planetary-class battleships would only cost billions of universe coins, which means that star-class battleships are expensive and need billions more. If there is no concept yet, then buying a life planet with no special resources, one that can accommodate humans, only requires tens of millions of dollars in funding. You should know that this is a life planet. However, using a gravity generator is still at a low magnification, requiring tens of thousands of cosmic coins of energy each year. The cost can be imagined, so cargo ships in the universe, except for personnel living areas, do not use gravity generators. It is too expensive, and there is no way to do so. If not, the quality of life will be very poor. For Carl now, the best method is magic runes. He knows that Asgard's warships all have such runes, and the energy consumption is even less than 1% of that of the technology-side gravity generator. Why did this situation occur? The reason is also very simple, that is, the energy to maintain gravity actually comes from Asgard, not from magic energy blocks. Energy blocks are only runes that activate the absorption of divine power. The energy consumed to maintain gravity can allow the runes to absorb the divine power, which is the most economical. After all, reducing the annual cost from tens of thousands or even millions to a few hundred to several thousand universe coins per year is the best method. But there is still a big problem now, neither of them understands magic. There are very few people in Asgard who can learn magic. After all, the only mentors who teach magic are the goddess Freyja and her maids. Yu reading books www.yuyukeangshu.net. Of course, the father of the gods, Odin, can also teach, but who can let him teach? Sylvia is also very intelligent. She understood what it meant and couldn't help but ask, "Do you mean you want to use magic runes to create these?" But none of the people we know magic, and even the master and others have hardly encountered anyone who knows magic before. Should we go find Prince Loki? When Sylvia said to go find Prince Loki, Carl felt a slight pain in his waist. Is that someone he can find? It's better to find him than to find the maidservants of the goddess Freyja, they may be more reliable. Carl smiled bitterly at this moment and said, "That's His Highness the Prince. It's better to find His Majesty the Queen's maid than to find him." Sylvia also nodded at this moment and said, "That's true, but Her Majesty the Queen's maids have always followed her, except for occasionally teaching some disciples who are studying magic. It's difficult for us to find them." Carl couldn't help but smile bitterly and say, "I don't know who to find to do this. His Highness the Prince is not something we can interact with, after all, we are just civilians and our strength is very average." Carl must dispel Sylvia's idea of looking for Loki. If she really did find him, maybe at some point, the two of them would just give someone their heads because Loki was sentenced. After all, Loki has stabbed Thor more than 50 times and treated his brother like this. How could he care about others? The two of them were eating and thinking like this. Just as they were about to have breakfast, Sylvia suddenly said, "By the way, didn't you say that His Majesty the Divine King shouldn't retaliate against the Creoles? I think he won't be stingy with giving you some compensation. How do you think of asking His Majesty Odin, the father of the gods, to learn magic and runes?" Chapter 9. Audience. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Carl's eyes lit up at this moment, and it was really a good idea. His Majesty Odin would definitely not be able to go to war with the Kree people. In order to appease the people, it was obvious that compensation needed to be given to Carl and the families of other victims. Otherwise, although no one would say anything, it would obviously have a significant impact on the reputation of the royal family. In such a situation, as long as Carl proposes to learn magic, His Majesty Odin, the father of the gods, has 80.9% confidence in agreeing. After all, for a commoner like Carl, if he wants to learn magic, he just needs to follow the maid of the Queen Mother of the Gods, who cannot personally teach him. It doesn't matter if there is one more Carl. After all, His Majesty Freyja's maid, who studied magic with her, did not have any particularly outstanding achievements. Most of them were killed together during the invasion of the Dark Elves. So, what achievements can a commoner Karl achieve even if he studies? This had no impact on the royal family and even comforted the people. However, for Karl, the meaning is completely different. It can prevent Sylvia from coming into contact with Loki. It is too dangerous to come into contact with Loki. Their vitality is not as strong as Thor's. If they are stabbed, they may die directly. Moreover, except for His Majesty the Queen and Thor, Loki can give up on everyone. At this point, Karl said, "Good idea. When I meet His Majesty Odin, the father of the gods, I will act accordingly. If His Majesty asks me if I have any requirements, I will make them. By the way, you must be careful not to disturb His Highness the Prince. They are all important figures, and we cannot disturb them." Sylvia saw Karl continuing to hold on to this point and said, "I will pay attention." Seeing Sylvia's indifferent expression, Karl felt the need to wake her up. He stood up and whispered, putting his head in her ear, "I heard that Prince Loki often attacks Prince Saul with a dagger. He has been stabbed nearly 50 times, so we must not disturb Prince Loki. We are too fragile." After saying these things, Karl sat back in his seat, while Sylvia looked incredulous with a slightly trembling voice and asked, "Are what you're saying true? How could such a thing happen?" Karl continued, "I've heard of it too. Don't spread it out. We just try to stay away from him as much as possible. Our lives are very fragile, and I don't want to lose you. You don't want to lose me, do you?" At this moment, Sylvia also solemnly let out a sigh of understanding, and then the two of them began a whirlwind. Time was running out, and he needed to finish his meal as soon as possible before going to the Golden Palace to meet His Majesty Odin. After finishing quickly, Karl also tidied up his leather armor with the help of Sylvia. Yes, he usually wears leather armor, and after everything was fine, the two of them went to the Golden Palace together. Of course, only Karl would go in during the audience. Quickly arriving at the Golden Palace, around 9 o'clock, Karl revealed his identity to the guards guarding the palace and was quickly summoned. Following the etiquette in his memory, Karl landed on one knee, raised his right hand flat to his chest, clenched his fist, lightly tapped his left chest, and said, "Son of Hall, Karl, see His Majesty Odin, the great father of the gods." With that, he bowed his head to show his respect. Seriously, after waking up the past memory, Karl was quite roast about Asgard's etiquette. He had no choice. Even if you were just speaking at ordinary times and disrespectful to His Majesty Odin, you might be reported by Helmdar. Although it may not be what will happen, it certainly will not end well. So even when speaking at home, it is important to be as respectful as possible to members of the royal family, mainly Odin, Freyja, and Thor. Loki should be treated more casually, and Heimdall does not treat Loki much. However, doing so would appear too deliberate and may attract unnecessary attention. At this moment, Odin said, "Karl, son of Hall, I am very sorry for your parents' suffering, but considering that the stable life of all the Asgard people will not be disrupted, I have decided not to retaliate against the Kree people. I hope you can understand that this is a blessing for all the Asgard people, and of course, we have received compensation." Although Karl had anticipated it in his heart, he was still quite disappointed when he heard that he would not retaliate against the Kree people. However, at this point, it can only be so. After all, Odin has made a decision, which cannot be changed by him as a commoner. Therefore, he said, "I will obey your oracle, Your Majesty Odin, the great father of the gods." After listening to Karl's words, Odin lightly tapped the ground with Gungnir. At this moment, the prepared guard held a small box and handed it to Karl. Odin continued, "This is compensation for you. One person costs 100 million universe coins, and your parents both died, totaling 200 million. Do you have any other demands now, child?" Obviously, these 2 billion cosmic coins are compensation for the Kree people, and the demand that Karl can make is the additional compensation that Odin has given to Karl for his current affairs. Odin is a divine king and wants his people to give him face. As long as this compensation is not too excessive, Odin will definitely not be stingy, and this is also the opportunity Karl needs. Karl then continued, "Thank you for your generosity, your Majesty Odin, the great father of the gods. Your people have a small plea, hoping to learn some magic and rune knowledge. We look forward to your permission." After hearing that Karl only requested to learn some magic and rune knowledge, Odin felt even more satisfied. After all, this requirement was not high. He then listened to His Majesty Odin continue, "I agree to your plea. Starting tomorrow, you can learn magic and runes with Graina. Do you know where the classroom is?" Classroom. Karl certainly knows that it is not far from where they are learning cultural knowledge, but ordinary people do not have the opportunity to learn. Asgard's knowledge monopoly is still very severe, and many advanced knowledge is not open to the common people, such as magic and runes, advanced use of divine power, and divine blessings. Of course, there are also many good things that are open to everyone, which are technological knowledge, but generally no one looks at them. Although Asgard doesn't pay much attention to these, he will still collect them, which is beneficial for understanding Asgard's enemies. Once a war occurs, he can accurately attack the opponent's technology. The most advanced of them is the utilization method of neutron stars, which is the construction method of Nadavi, and Karl has seen it in public libraries. This is a neutron star, and through the device, Nadavi can turn on or off the energy radiation of the neutron star. This technology is so advanced that it can be said to be the highest in the universe, and none of the three empires can do it. Of course, there is also a lot of magic involved inside, which is not something that ordinary forces can create. Karl estimates that to complete the construction, at least an investment of billions of universe coins is needed. It is not something that ordinary forces can play well with. It is probably to deter outsiders, so it is openly placed in the public library. Of course, that's all for now. The rest are just martial arts and similar skills. For commoners, learning these is enough. Karl achieved his goal and quickly said, "Thank you for your kindness, your Majesty Odin, the great father of the gods. I know where the classroom is, and tomorrow I will go and learn from Teacher Guna." Upon seeing Karl say this, Odin struck the ground again. Karl understood that this was causing him to leave. His meeting time had ended, and Yu reading www.uukangshu.net. At this moment, Karl also loudly said, "Thank you again for your kindness, your son Karl, the son of Hall." He got up and lowered his head to exit for more than 10 steps before putting down his right hand and turning to leave. Quickly arriving outside the Golden Palace, Sylvia saw him leave the palace and hurriedly walked over, whispering, "How is it? Does your Majesty Odin, the great father of the gods, want to retaliate against the Creoles?" Karl saw Sylvia's eagerness and quickly pulled her towards the residential area. As he walked, he said, "Your Majesty has given up his revenge on the Cree people, but I have also had the opportunity to learn magic. After I study for a while, I should be able to try using rune knowledge to establish a gravity field, and then we can quickly improve our strength." At this moment, Sylvia said, "As you guessed, it seems we can only seek revenge on our own." Karl saw Sylvia feeling a bit down and comforted her, "Don't worry, I won't make the Cree people feel too good. I swear, but we need to improve our strength first. We are too weak now." Sylvia then continued, "What else did your Majesty say? Your audience ended quite quickly." Karl sighed and said, "It would be great if your Majesty could take some time to summon me. It's normal for me to go there so quickly. After all, going there is just some compensation for me. We can't go against your Majesty's will. Karl is just a small person, who has the strength to defy Odin's will. Moreover, a young Protoss like him, appearing alone in the universe, is basically the target of many forces to capture." Karl suspects that his parents died, and maybe it was all intentional by the Cree people. They have never given up researching superpowers. What is there better material than the Protoss? So the Kree people are very likely to capture the Asgard people.